Dan Delmar and Justine McIntyre in for Aaron and Natasha. Always interesting. There's a lot of pressure on us, especially. We're doing our best. That's what the voice guy said just before. Always interesting.
Yeah.
Always.
A lot of pressure on us? Are you feeling the pressure, Dan? I think
always.
we're doing
I always feel
good.
pressure when I'm on the public airwaves.
You're doing great.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
And you're fairly new at this, so you're doing really great, Justine.
Thank you.
And Dr. Mitch on the way in a second. I just want to point out that we have a breaking news story out in Bay d'Urfé, a large commercial fire. The area has been evacuated, so we're not getting any reports of injuries yet. Hopefully everyone's okay there. But if you see what's going on, or if you witness the explosion, 514-790-0800, 790-0800, and we can take your testimony there. Okay, Dr. Mitch is back. Hello, Dr. Mitch.
Howdy, and a good afternoon to you both.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Same to you. Before we get to gluten, which is on my mind and in my intestines, I want to just deal with the heat wave. It's going to stay hot for the next few days till Sunday. Is this a bad one, or is it one that's sort of going to be okay for most people with issues?
The problem is the humidity. As the humidex gets up, it's now, around 35? Beyond 30, you feel uncomfortable. Beyond 35, you feel, 40, you're in danger. 45, you're in extreme danger. And that's because as the humidity goes up, as acclimatized as you might be, as in great shape as you might be, whatever athlete you might be, the problem is you can't sweat properly. And that's because the high humidity keeps you from being able to sweat. When you sweat, the water goes off your skin, evaporates, takes the heat with it. Well, if the air is filled with humidity, it can't do that. And so that's why the sweat pools on your body. That's why you feel so miserable. And you're at much greater risk for your core temperature going up, heat stroke, heat exhaustion, all the things that go along with that. So even if the sun isn't out right now, as long as the heat and humidity are high, you have to take it easy, give yourself longer to do things, take frequent breaks, drink, and I usually suggest a variety of non-alcoholic beverages, and that's so that you replenish some of the natural salts that you lose with sweating, and then try and get some time in an air-conditioned or cooled environment every day that gives your body a chance to kind of recoup some energy and strength. And if you have neighbors who are elderly or have medical problems, keep an eye on them, check on how they're doing. They really can fall prey to this, and be careful with your pets. They also can fall prey to the heat.
And so right now, Dr. Mitch, at 3 p.m., we're at 76% humidity. So that would be
miserable.
And doubly miserable if I got the gluten situation, Justine. Really weighed down.
Dr. Mitch, that sounds like some great advice there, by the way, for trying to stay cool. Thank you for that. Dan and I were speaking earlier and kind of putting the question to our callers as well. There seems to be an increase in the amount of people in our population suffering from either gluten intolerance or celiac disease. And so we wanted to ask you, Dr. Mitch, have you also observed an increase in celiac disease? And if you have, what do you think it can be attributed to?
So there's definitely an increase. And the key question is it just because people are more aware? Is it because the people with the genetic disease, which is the most severe form, are more likely now to have, be able to have kids and not have problems because they can be medically treated? We don't know. But certainly there does seem to be more. And there's three gradations, as it were, of this disease, if you want to look at it. There's wheat allergy, which has nothing to do with this whatsoever. It's an actual allergic reaction to wheat, and someone can have the full-blown, hives, the whole bit. That's one category. The categories you're talking about are gluten intolerance or sensitivity and true celiac disease. True celiac disease is a very rare autoimmune disorder, about 1% of the population, higher in certain ethnic groups, because it is transmitted genetically. And these are people whose own immune system has turned against them whenever they consume wheat, or specifically gluten, which is found in barley, oats, and wheat. And when that triggers your immune reaction, not only does it attack the lining of your gut, causing malabsorption and pain and bloating and diarrhea or constipation and a whole constellation of problems, but can then go on to attack your joints, to attack other parts of your body. If you have one autoimmune disease, you're likely to have others, affecting thyroid and other organs as well. So that's a small percentage of people, but it's a miserable disease, and I don't want to minimize it. Where we're lucky nowadays is, when I started off with all of this, there was hardly any food that you could find that was gluten-free. Now the range of gluten-free products has increased dramatically. Now, there's a larger bunch of people, probably somewhere between 5 and 13% of the population, who's gluten sensitive. They don't have the full-blown celiac disease. It's not autoimmune, but for some reason their body does not like gluten. And when they eat it, 1 or 2 hours afterwards, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit shorter, they get bloating and nausea. They can have diarrhea or constipation. They can have fatigue, anemia, because they just don't absorb as well, and it can really make their lives miserable. Now, how do you make the diagnosis? How do you know? Well, there's a blood test that helps us diagnose celiac disease. You can go on an elimination diet. In other words, cut all gluten out of your diet for a couple of days and see what happens, or do a gluten diary. See what you're eating and when your symptoms are worse, and then go back and check what your food is. And then last but not least, your family doctor and a gastroenterologist, a specialist in disorders of the stomach and the intestines. Sometimes it helps if we do a gastroscopy. That's where they put a camera down into your tummy, into your intestines,
Yes.
and actually look at what's going on there. Maybe take a piece of material, a biopsy, to diagnose exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that was the path that I was on, and unfortunately, before my diagnosis, my doctor's first recommendation was to put me on the BRAT diet, which is bananas, rice, apples, and toast. So that was not helpful. And I think for the elimination diet, more than a few days is needed to really figure out if that's the problem.
Yeah.
Dr. Mitch, is it possible, because there's definitely a genetic predisposition in the population, and as you mentioned, a lot of those people in, let's say, 100 years ago would simply have died and not gone on to become thriving individuals. It was one of the characteristics of celiac disease is a failure to thrive in children, leading to death, and therefore the gene simply wasn't passed on. So potentially we're catching it earlier, we're able to diagnose it and make the change, so that's being transmitted. That gene is then being transmitted. Mm-hmm. But is it possible also that modern wheat varieties contain more immunoreactive protein than in the past?
Don't know.
Okay.
It's a very good question, but certainly it's something that comes out. And, you know, with the genetically modified products that we're now using, you know, you have to ask yourself if that's playing a role. Yeah. No one can definitively prove that it is or isn't at this point in time. It's just something in our environment that we're just going to have to accept as being out there and try and deal with it without question. And you're right about it taking sometimes a little bit longer to actually go on a gluten-free diet to be able to figure out what's going on.
Yes, because in my case, actually, what I was told is that the gluten stays in the system for much longer, so it takes quite a while to flush it out and to be able to figure out if that's the issue. Another environmental factor is potentially pesticides. Have you heard anything about the massive use of pesticides now in wheat, and if that might be an aggravating factor or something that would predispose to developing a gluten intolerance?
See, so all those are theoretical constraints and concerns. And certainly we haven't seen that people who go completely organic, in other words, pesticide-free foods, that they have a lower incidence of these types of problems. It may help some people, it may not. To be honest with you, the way you accumulate data on something like this, it's almost impossible to tease out things like the different varieties of wheat, the different varieties of pesticides that are being used in our communities. But certainly there's absolutely no proof, you know, categorical scientific proof. But think how difficult it would be to do that proof. The best way of getting proof for anything like this is what we call a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. And what you would do is you'd randomly assign people to a specific diet and follow them over a bunch of years. You can see how difficult it would be to do a study like that. How many people you'd have to use, how many millions, if not hundreds of millions, but literally millions of dollars it would cost. And so there's really, and I hate to put it this way, there's no incentive, unfortunately, to do a study like this unless you can get support from the government, either the National Institutes of Health in the States or the Canadian health organizations here in Canada. So a study like this is the only way to be sure, and it'd be a very tough study to do.
Real quick, Dr. Mitch, just curious about a cultural question, because when I talk to other members of the Jewish community, especially Ashkenazis, and I'm mostly Sephardic, but I guess the genetic Ashkenazi component slipped in here when it comes to gluten, but everyone says, well, it's just the thing that everyone has, right? The gluten thing, the stomach thing. Is that cultural lore, or is there really a genetic connection between Ashkenazis and gluten issues?
There's definitely a genetic component. It's definitely much more prevalent in certain communities, not just the Ashkenazi Jewish community, but others. It's not cultural. Having said that, the Sephardic community, the Sephardic Jewish community, basically eats a more rice-based diet than a wheat-based diet, which is characteristic of the Eastern European descendants of the Ashkenazi Jews. So who knows? But it's certainly not cultural. There's definitely something there. It's in the body. And the key thing is to realize what's going on, keep track of what you're eating, see what your symptoms are worse, do try an elimination diet, and if necessary, do be investigated. We now have the tools to make the diagnosis. We didn't have them before.
Thanks so much, Dr. Mitch. Wishing you a great weekend.
You too. All the very best, and thank you.